Welcome, everybody. We'd like to thank you for attending the second lecture in our social justice series. We are very excited tonight to have an artist here, Sylvi Herrick, who is from St. Augustine, Florida. And Sylvi works in neon. And if you have had the chance to walk past the Matheson Museum or drive past between yesterday afternoon and now, you will see Sylvi's work prominent on the museum building and on the museum, library, and archives almost directly across the street. These are two very important messages that speak to each other. And we find that they are very, very profound, and we're grateful that Sylvi is letting us show these for the next couple of months. Sylvi is going to tell you about her background and how she came to this writing and creating from a poem by the poet Janessa Martin. So we are thrilled. Welcome, Sylvi. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's all yours.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm so thrilled to be here. And this is the first time I've done one of these Zoom things where I'm actually, the focus is on me. So I'm a little nervous, but I have put together some broad brush strokes to sort of paint the picture of my background and how this work came to be. And I'm so excited to be a part of the Matheson Museum program and this specifically the social justice series that they're putting on, because that is really the main motivator of all the work that I've been doing for a long time. So hopefully you guys can see this image. This is, it was just installed. This is one of the two poet panels created by Janessa Martin, who is my collaborator, and this is the second image. And they are purposely across the street from each other so that they're like a part of a conversation. So the viewer becomes in the middle of it, and the viewer's experience and interpretation really is what the art is all about. So it's my handwriting and my fabrication and my kind of concept of using the poetry this way, but the words are completely borrowed and a collaboration with the poet Janessa Martin. So forgive me for reading, but I'm gonna go through a couple concepts now to try and explain to you how I got where I am now. So this work is called Lights of Conversations. It's to get people talking more and to come together more. It really came from what I consider to be huge problems that we have today. So the problem is how divided we are, how divided we become, the need for bridges everywhere. COVID has made it worse. The media, our isolation, our lack of resources, our fears. I and everyone I know are feeling like, who can we trust? We need bridges everywhere, more bridges to bring us together. As an artist, I think the time is now to take the biggest risks of our lives in the name of democracy and love. We live in uncharted waters in a highly diverse country where we need to solve our problems ourselves. We need to realize that diversity is the prize. Lights of Conversations born from thoughts like this and the struggle to bring ideas and art together in order to try and build some trust and some peace. So what is this? It's putting beauty, colors, and ideas into public space. Do I know my audience? No, and that's not the typical approach to making work like this. As an artist, usually we're taught we must know who our audience is because we're creating for them. But what I love is that I don't know my audience and I don't know what's going to happen. It's out of my control, but it's where it should be with people who live in a place and walk by or drive by, or anybody can really access it if they can get there. And I used neon because neon is effervescent, it's bubbly, it's enthusiastic, and it's also pervasive. So neon can spread. It's typically been used for advertising, but as a form of getting people's attention and motivating them into some sort of action. So my thought is the action of peace and coming together. So I'm going to read the description. Hopefully I'm not repeating myself too much, that I sent out to the Matheson Museum. Lights of Conversation is an artwork that consists of 2 neon panels displaying poetry from 2 poems by Janessa Martin, flashing back and forth across from each other in conversation. Ideally, they be flashing, but I think that's pushing it. The viewer becomes part of the conversation by literally being in the middle of the artwork. I'm inspired to make work that is inclusive in public space and brings people together. Conceived from my desperation as an artist to use art as a peacemaker, and after watching in awe at the events over the last several months, I've been wondering what action steps I can take as a human, citizen, and artist to continue all the conversations and clarity that must happen for creating real change in racial equality. Lights of Conversations is a direct response to the gravity of the moment and Black Lives Matter. I want it to drive deeper the need for us to talk about systemic race issues. This is a call to community to come together, and viewers are encouraged to be brave and have honest conversations. Despite dividing forces, my perspective is that within the illumination of nuances, we can connect, and that words are still full of meaning, and spoken words possess even more power. I feel like I should read Janessa's bio too. Unfortunately, she's not here with us tonight, but she is here with us because we are all looking at her powerful words. I'm Janessa Martin, a writer at heart and an educator by profession. I started writing when I was just a young girl, and I took a long break, and now I'm back to writing again when my kids are asleep. I studied English and humanities, and I am such a lover of contextualization and the interwoven nature of life and art. In my writing, I focus heavily on my personal experiences as a mother, an empath, and a biracial woman. I try to expand on those experiences to reflect the messy entanglement of life and the themes at war in a modern woman's mind. My writing can sometimes be quite bleak, but I try to honor and capture the realistic intricacies of what it is to be human. Alternatively, in my professional life as a curriculum designer, I write uplifting children's books about social and emotional learning. This writing also brings me great joy. And she says, I studied at Florida State University and Boston University. I currently serve on the board of a local nonprofit, Women Writing for a Change, Jacksonville, and my creative nonfiction has been published in A River Rising and an anthology of women's voices. So, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my past and the themes of my work that have been consistent since I can remember. Themes of my work have always been democracy, borders, boundaries, and social justice. My family and friends where I grew up had a lot to do with this, so I'm going to tell you the basics. My dad grew up as an only kid during the Depression in Cleveland, Ohio, and was raised by his grandparents. He was academically inclined and a musician and made his way through great schools and became an economist and a writer. Huge influence on my life. Our house was filled with books and piles of newspapers, a lot of them conspiracy theory types of newspapers, which were really interesting to look through as a kid and not always appreciated at school. And my mom, he met my mom when they were both on vacation in Puerto Rico. Now my mom, Maya, she's a refugee and she was born in Estonia. She and her family escaped from Estonia during the Second World War, which is the story of my mom and my family on that side just is a massive impact in my work. Her family was in a displaced persons camp in Germany for a number of years until they were sponsored by a family to go on an American ship to Canada. I don't know if people know where Estonia is, so here's installation. I'm going to show you. So Estonia is really, really small on this map and way up there, but in my mind, it's really huge. Being from Estonia brings a lot of feelings of resilience and passion. There was something called the human chain, which was a peaceful form of resistance in 1989, where all the Baltic states got together and they literally, for miles and miles through Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, held hands to create a human chain to fight for their own independence under Russian rule. And it actually worked. So my mom became a neuropathologist, and what that meant was that I grew up with brains in containers around my house. And she doesn't like it when I say that, but it's true. And I also grew up with once a week, she would be preparing for her, teaching her courses to her residents. And so I would walk through the rooms and there would be projected slides of sliced brains with dye on them, which is they're really interesting patterns. So I had that, I had the conspiracy theory newspapers, I had all this history of my family escaping it from Estonia. And I was also growing up in Palo Alto, California, on University Avenue, which is kind of funny because the Matheson Museum is on University Avenue. And it was down the street from Stanford University, which is now the center of Silicon Valley, basically. Growing up there, I was surrounded by a certain attitude very much, which really was kind of shaped by the 60s. And it was a place where out of the box thinking was encouraged. There were a lot of musicians, there were a lot of intellectuals and rebels. And I remember graduating from my public high school, and our special speaker was singer-songwriter Joan Baez. And she was saying all these things to motivate us and get us excited about making a change in the world. And she ended her little talk by saying, and remember, you guys, you really get to know someone when you go to jail with them. So that was my high school graduation. I think I had a lot of responsibility on my shoulders to do something. I always knew I was going to be an artist. I always took art classes. I always felt happiest amongst art and artists. After high school, I went to New York. I went and to a liberal arts school, but I majored in art and focused on painting and batiks. After college, I traveled. I taught English in Japan, and I was investigating traditional dyeing techniques throughout Southeast Asia. And when I came back, I didn't know how I was going to make things work financially. So I thought, okay, I'm going to combine my love of fabrics with my art, and I went and got a fashion design degree. I worked for a company I worked in Los Angeles and New York, and for a company in the Bay Area called Indigenous Designs, which was way ahead of their time because it's a long time ago. They were working with organic cotton, green cotton, and small collectives in South America. So let me show you another picture. This is a poster that I've had in my studio for a really, really long time. It's a Buckminster Fuller quote. I don't know if you guys know him, but he's an amazing artist. And so I did work in fashion for a while, but I really, really missed the classroom. I'm trying to keep an eye on the time. I missed the classroom. I missed the fact that the most important lessons that I learned about myself as an artist and some really, really core stuff happened in a classroom where it was safe and creative and people were confronting me. And I realized I owed so much of who I was to former teachers and students that I'd spent time with. So I decided I would go back and get an MFA so that I could also teach and pass on all kinds of things that I've learned. So I went to graduate school at California College of the Arts in Oakland, where I focused on painting again, because to me that felt like that's what you do. You do painting or you do sculpture. My final thesis topic was on borders and boundaries. Again, always thinking about Estonia and Russia and nature of borders and boundaries in general in the world, and how it's really people that decide to make these edges, these limits, these lines that we're going to abide by, and what they mean to people's lives. So I went to CCA, and immediately after I graduated, I went and started teaching. This is a quote that I love. "All colors are the friends of their neighbors and lovers of their opposites" by Chagall. And it's relating to the color wheel. And I think it's just so brilliant, because if we look across the color wheel in any direction, we see complementary colors or opposites. And what Chagall is saying is that they're lovers of their opposites, because those colors in combination together are always really, really beautiful. So I was teaching, and I was in Oakland. I met my husband, Matthias, and I was realizing more and more and feeling kind of frustrated, like my artwork just had to jump off the walls and get into the world. I was also realizing through teaching how little access my students and colleagues had to the art that we were always talking about in the classroom. All these paintings, all these things, really people weren't actually getting to see them in person. We were just looking at them. And that was just frustrating me in general. I was really thinking about how art works in our country, and how class, culture, financial status, location, all those things were just playing into people not being able to access art. And that was really, really bugging me. It's not like that in every country. Some other countries, the art is really in the public spaces, in the plazas, and in the churches, and in the everyday life kind of spaces that people hang out. But in the US, it's not really so accessible. So despite my belief that encouraging and teaching the art of creativity is probably the most important skill anyone can cultivate, the lack of accessibility of art to all people was really a struggle. In addition, I was getting more and more frustrated with being in the Bay Area and Oakland, lack of nature, cost of living. So Matthias and I decided, let's take a huge leap of faith and go somewhere we've never been, where I could ride my bike to work, and it was less expensive, and he could have a job in his field, which is solar voltaic, so environmental field. So this is a painting of Audre Lorde that I did a few years ago, and a quote of hers that I think about all the time and was a part of being able to take that leap. It goes, "When I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in the service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important whether I'm afraid." Hopefully you know Audre Lorde. If you don't, check her out. Amazing, amazing writer, poet, activist, human being. So now, well, not now, but at this part in the story, I'm teaching at Flagler College. I'm riding my bike to work. I'm in the art department, and my husband has a good job. My kids are thriving, but I was still feeling frustrated, making paintings, having shows, but just feeling like there was more that I could do. It was literally like a little voice, like there's more you can do than this. And so it was about mid-2018 where a lot of stuff happened. My father passed away. My mother got really sick. I was the only person to take care of her. These kinds of things make you think about what's going on in your life, and are you doing everything that you possibly can to be the best human being you can? And that was really playing into this idea of my work. At the time also, the border wall with Mexico was the main thing going on that was resonating with me in the media. And it was so extremely, should we have a wall, build a wall for this huge amount of money, or not have a wall? And of course, all these refugees, all these people, children, adults, who are needing some sort of safe place to be, I was having so much compassion for, and feeling so frustrated that we weren't hearing any creative ideas about what to do other than build a wall or not build a wall. And it was in that frustration that I had a vision, which is the way most of my work happens. Usually I have some sort of vision of something, and then I don't even know why I'm doing it, but if the vision's clear, then I go towards it. So I had this crazy vision of basically 3 7-foot crows in the back of a trailer. And I thought to myself, I'm going to take my art on the road and I'm going to go talk to people along the way about the border wall and talk to people, anybody they'll talk to me, and just sort of explore ideas about why are we doing this and what do you think we should do? And of course, stopping at places along the way where people really live on the border wall, where they really know what it's like to be there, where they really understand if there's a big problem or not. And I really didn't have any idea myself. I just wanted to see what would happen. So I took off and I made some plans, and I had pop-up shows, and I saw who I saw, and I engaged with so many people. And there was a lot of fear before I left, because people warned me, you're going on the road with these 3 7-foot crows, you're driving a truck, and you should be armed, and people are going to shoot at you, and you should notify the police and give everybody your itinerary. And I just I went for it. And all I had were interesting conversations and connections. And by using these crows, which a lot of people hate and a lot of people don't like or understand, but crows are super, super smart, possibly the smartest birds. They're brave risk takers, collaborators, creative. They make tools to achieve their goals, literally tools, like putting things together. They play, they have their own language, they have facial recognition. They're in the history of our stories, and they're thought of to be magical. And my thought was, maybe by using something that people already might have an opinion about, we would get into a conversation, and maybe in the problem of why people are annoyed by crows or don't understand crows, maybe in the problem lies the answers. So that was my crow project. And it's still actually ongoing, because stuff is still happening with it. That led me to being invited by Jennifer Wolfe of Women Writing for a Change Jacksonville. She invited me to be a part of a show about birds. And her organization is very focused on writing, obviously. And so she put me in collaboration with somebody named Janessa Martin, who you've already heard about. And so I told Janessa about my crow project. She was really interested in it. And so she wrote 2 poems, which the current work comes from also. A Crow's Message is one, and the other is A Fear of Crows / Blackness. So she wrote these incredible poems, and I was still interested in making work that's available to the public. So I created a few of these road signs, and I intertwined her poetry with images of indigenous animals that also have a lot of kind of mythological background to them too, and put them in public space. That was really cool and fun, and I loved it. And then fast forward early 2020, COVID hit. I was shut down as an artist, and I've talked to artists and heard all different kinds of things of what happened when we all got shut down. But basically, I wasn't in the mood to make art. I didn't know what to make art about anymore. I didn't know who would care or what would matter. I just kind of meditated and waited as things kept going bad. May 25th, 2020, and George Floyd was murdered. I couldn't believe it. I was depressed to the core of my soul about what was going on here. I'm like gonna cry. And then June 1st, 2020, and I was in my car for about a 30-minute drive going to pick up my children. And I was sort of trapped in there, and the radio was on, listening live to the unfolding events of Lafayette Square in Washington, D.C. Peaceful protesters attacked by riot police and tear gas. I mean, I felt like I was there because I heard everything, and I could just, I just felt like I was there. The New York Times called it a burst of violence unlike any seen in the shadow of the White House in generations. The next day, literally, I had the vision for the work that is up at the Matheson now. wasn't perfectly clear, but I realized that those poems by Janessa were so prophetic and so amazing. So I pulled them out and I taped them up on my wall, and I started looking at them to see if there was any kind of call and response or conversation going on between the two poems, because I felt like I had to do something in public. I really wanted to bring her words into the public so that we can explore deeper what the heck we need to do to come together. Remarkably, I found all these places that I thought that the poems were only like talking to each other. So I got on the phone with Janessa and was like, hey, you know, would you be interested in doing a collaboration with me? And I'd like to use her words. And the way that the vision came to me was that it would be in neon, which I had worked with before and loved. And so she said yes. I don't think either of us really knew what it was going to look like, but I had a pretty clear photo in my mind. So I ended up using the introduction to both those poems, which I wish she was here to read to you, and I wish you could see them, but they're on my website, and hopefully they'll be displayed also, or maybe they already are, at the Matheson, so people can see them because they're really beautiful, and you should read them in their entirety together, but that's what the work comes from. So in this particular piece, which we're at now, you know, there's verse, there's light, there's place, creating an aesthetic experience, there's urgency because there's lightness and darkness, and all this color. I could go off on color for like hours because that is something that is really my probably primary interest in a formal way, how it works and how they work together. So these signs are yellow, these signs are blue and red. And when they're close to each other, they actually create purple, which is really interesting too, because again, this is about bringing things together, bringing people together who may be totally different, but realizing that we need to work together in this country, on this planet, and listen to each other. So as I was building this and running around trying to get it up somewhere in public immediately, actually our vision is to have multiple pairs in different places around the country up simultaneously, because this conversation needs to happen everywhere and it's very ongoing. I was devouring newspapers and reading all these commentaries about what's going on with the monuments, because of course public art in public space, art on common ground is something I've been interested in for a very, very long time. So while I'm devouring all these newspapers, on June 30th, the Wall Street Journal ran a large essay by two scholars from Princeton called Monuments for Our Shared Purpose. And I like things that make you go, like I looked at the image, I read what they had to say, and I immediately wrote a response, a letter to the editor, and it was published. I think it's on my website, but it really was going to it talks about if the image shows a clear hierarchy of power, as it does in this case, it's not okay. And art can cause pain. And I am publicly and privately very invested in this issue that we have right now with all these monuments and memorials. What should we do with them? And I think there is space for artists and collective creative people to come in and not necessarily remove them forever, but put them into context, or maybe completely change them. Maybe we melt them down and we reconfigure that bronze into something else that really reflects who we are and ideals that we want to try to aspire to, something that actually makes sense. So that's just something that I'm really, really interested in exploring further, and hope I have a chance to work with some other people on what the future of that problem. So now we're at the end of this, and I appreciate you hanging in there with me because it's longer than I intended, but there's so many possibilities. There have been many possibilities for this work. I've been working tirelessly since I created back in June. But I'm so grateful that the Matheson Museum was crazy enough and forward thinking enough to give it space and give it air and get behind it, because I think it's really important that we use art as a peacemaker. Art has always been used in peaceful ways. It's always been used to bring people together. And I'm talking about art on the biggest scale. Like we're talking music and dance and two-dimensional art and three-dimensional art, poetry and writing and food and fashion design. I mean, that's why most of us make art. So that's the title of this talk, Art as a Peacemaker. And that's my commitment to all the pieces that I make for the rest of my life. And thank you. And I hope there are some questions, because I'd love to talk more about it.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing this kind of background on the work and how it came to be. So now if you all have any questions, you can use the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or if you're watching on Facebook, you can put it in the comment section. Oh, hello.
Oh, hi, Sylvi, that was great. Scott and I enjoyed your talk so much, and there's so many things that I would like to find out that you've been doing during this time, and some of them, you have mentioned some of the conversations, but to hear more about that, of the conversations that you have had with your pieces there at the Matheson.
Well, this piece just got installed literally, what, 24 hours ago, 36 hours ago? And I think we're still getting up the support materials behind it so people can get deeper into it. So this piece, it's new. I don't know. Have you heard anything yet about it?
No, we're up in Vermont, so.
Right. Okay, so at this point, the only thing I can say about the work is all the people that I've talked to along the way to get the work up. And that's been, you know, part of making this kind of work involves so much logistics, people from cities, fabricators, getting people's advice on stuff. And that's part of what I love about this work, is that I'm talking to people who aren't necessarily even art lovers or go look at art, but then they get into art because they realize they're a part of the process and part of the collaboration. This piece is such a huge collaboration. I'm like the teeniest part of it. And the real work is what's going to happen next. So that's a great question, and we'll have some answers for you in a few weeks.
Great. Well, it's wonderful. I wish I were there to see it.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we've had a question come in through the Q&A box. Why did you want to make a piece that creates a conversation, especially centered around social justice?
Do you think I answered that at all? I feel like I got into that. Why do I want to feel a conversation? Because I think that, you know, we're all just these people here trying to figure it out together, and we can do it. We're so diverse. We come from so many different places. The reasons that we're even here in the United States, for most of us, aren't even by our own choice. You know, it was luck, or it was chance, or we didn't have a choice, or a lot of people really want to be here, but like, we need to find a way to connect. So it was just trying to use a different method than the usual methods that I know of. Just to try and change our perspective for a second, get caught off guard for a second, be kind of confused so that you have to think about where you are in the middle of this.
Okay. Another question we have is, what have you been able to share with young artists?
What have I been able to share with young artists about this project, do we think?
However you want to interpret it, I suppose.
What have I been able to share with young artists? Well, I'll first say that I'm not sure what young artist means. I don't know if that means college students or younger. But I think everybody's an artist. And that probably sounds like a kind of lame answer, but I really, really, really mean it. I feel like if you're an artist who makes work, there's not much all the time. There's not really a separation between your life and your work. So everybody that I come into contact is going to sort of have to deal with the subject matter of my art, which is bringing people together. And I will also say, this is just a teaching comment, but I feel it's really true. I often have people ask the question, so, you know, when you're teaching, do you ever have really, really, really great artists? And my answer is that literally, and I'm not kidding, every single student that I've ever had is amazing. I've never had a student that didn't bring up some sort of unique voice that I'd never seen before. And so I just feel people need to get out there and be more creative.
Okay. So we have a comment and a question.
Okay.
It can be so powerful. Please comment on how the arts and history can work together to a more inclusive future.
Do you mind repeating that one more time?
Sure. Please comment on how the arts and history can work together to advance society to a more inclusive future.
Wow, I love that. I love that. And I think about that all the time because, of course, the version of history that most of us are taught is really just one version of that, right? And the arts is in a kind of unique position that I feel like artists can take more chances in telling different angles of what history might mean. And this memorial issue that we're having, that the world is having, is an incredible opportunity for historians and artists to get together to sort of reshape different stories and reflect different incidents and people that have been a part of our history that really reflect what has happened and who we are much, much better. I mean, sometimes I just sit there and I'm like, you know, I'm going to count how many female figure statues there are in the United States, because I don't really even think I can think of any. And then I'm like, well, I don't really have time to do that, or I don't know how to do that. Or where, you know, it's just such a narrow view of history. So I don't know. I mean, I think the arts in this monument moment would be the most brilliant place for historians and artists to get together to start bridging that better.
Okay. And then we have another question. I work as a solar artist. Have you given any thought to the carbon footprint of your work?
Absolutely. I would really, really like these to be powered up by solar, and then my husband is in solar, and maybe you have actually powered up Neon with solar before. I am so close to doing it. I've been working so hard on just getting the work out that this hasn't happened. But I tell you, in 2021, my work will be Neon with solar. Carbon footprint, there's more stuff to Neon, but one thing I love about it, is it is glass, and glass is a really kind of elegant and delicate material. And then Neon has this kind of buzzing to it, like it's a dying art. It's really, really unique. And then electricity always follows the path of least resistance. Neon gas is a part of the periodic table, and it exists out in the cosmos as it does on this planet. Like, there's so many cool things about neon just from a formal materials point of view. So I hope I answered your question, and I'm happy you asked it.
How do we connect people who don't support having the conversation this piece alludes to?
You know, that is a really great question. So this work requires the help of other people and other organizations. I know there are a lot of organizations, even specifically in Gainesville, who already have the language and tools to have some of these conversations. these difficult conversations, get people together and guide people through that. I would be thrilled and honored if some of those conversations could happen at the Matheson or somewhere around this work, and I'd love to be there for them. But yes, I'm not the facilitator of that. I can't be. I'm not trained to do that kind of work, but I would be so happy if people stepped up to do that. So this is an invitation.
What changed over the course of your development of this work, and what was an unexpected outcome?
Ooh, what changed? So, what changed? I think that's a hard one for me because I saw the vision of it and it really kind of does look like what I thought it would look like. I thought it was going to go up in a couple locations that it didn't make it to before it got here. And that's part of the difficulty of doing work in public space, because there is so much bureaucracy and reasons why people are afraid of public art. This is a temporary piece, so people shouldn't be afraid, but they still are. And that probably is was the hardest weird thing about it. Other than that, it was just how to get it up in a safe way so that people can see it and not get hurt by it or touch it or whatever. And, you know, that kind of thing, how to get it up there easily. And luckily the Matheson Museum was absolutely perfect. If they'd been right across the street from each other, it would be a little better, but everybody gets it. They're very close.
All right. Somebody would like to know, can you talk about how you and Janessa worked together originally? Your 7-foot crow, the theme of the birds exhibition, your collaboration process.
Yeah, you know, collaborations are they're so interesting because you really have to let go of control because you just don't know who that other person is and like how you guys are going to, you know, even figure out some sort of similarities. Luckily, she just completely related to the Crow Project, and that is specifically, if I recall correctly, the social justice part of that. She was just really excited that that was something that was behind the work. And that show was about birds, so that made it easy for us to think about crows. And I didn't talk too much about crows because this piece is about conversations, but crows have this long history, as you guys probably know, and even Jim Crow South and, you know, all kinds of things that can come into an artist's process of making work. She literally we chatted probably twice in person, and next thing I know and I know it wasn't quick, but next thing I know, she's like, I created these 2 poems. And this is what it's about. And I mentioned earlier, she's biracial, and I was just so excited that she was willing to just have her poetry be about this conversation that can be read so many different ways, but that race issues being one of them.
I think that's,
does that answer?
I think that's a nice segue into the next question, which each of these 2 statements, red and blue, seem to see their world quite differently. One is inclusive and one is quite biased. How do you see them leading to a constructive conversation?
Oh boy. Gosh, I mean, love. I was born in the summer of love. Love, you know, it's just, can we agree to disagree, but can we also agree that we all deserve to have a, you know, democratic life where people are treated with dignity and equally, and resources are available to everybody? I think there are places where we can come together. I will just say that on that Crow project, there were a number of times, at one time in particular, where I had a conversation with somebody who blazingly did not match my political background. And he came up to talk to me. I mean, he was wearing everything outside. I knew it. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to listen. We're going to have a conversation. And by the end of the conversation, it was like 45 minutes later. And honestly, we had tackled a number of very difficult topics and we were still friends, and we agreed, you know, I see your point of view. I see your point of view. So that's the nature of this piece, is that I think through conversations and really like looking in each other's eyes and hearing each other's stories, that maybe there can be a small shift. That's the kind of subversive part about making art like this. Like maybe your work can just make just little tiny shifts in people's opinions, and that can ripple out. So I think it takes one-on-one kind of work.
Okay. You said that the Crow Project is ongoing. Where are they located now?
They're in Palo Alto, California, where I've been in the newspaper a number of times. They're in front of my mom's house, and I would say at least once a day, she calls me with conversations, because people stop and they take pictures and they knock on the door and they want to talk to her about these crows. And then that gives her an opportunity to talk about the Crow Project, borders and boundaries, and what we can learn from getting to know things that we think are scary or bad or we don't like, but how really maybe there's this whole other flip side to everything, and that maybe what we fear is actually something totally amazing and mind-blowing that we can actually learn from.
Okay. So it looks like the questions are slowing down. So I'm going to take a minute and give an acknowledgement to our partners for this event. So thank you to the Cotton Club Museum and Cultural Center, Visit Gainesville, Alachua County, Florida, and the City of Gainesville Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs Division. So thank you to those organizations for partnering with us on this. And then also, we do have a reporter from WUFT is on this call, and she is hoping to talk to some of the audience members. So if you want to either put your contact information in the chat, or if you would like to just say that you would like to talk with the reporter, and I can share the email that you used to register for this call. And then if you have any other questions, go ahead and put them in. And then if nothing else comes in, this is going to be the last question. And it's kind of a two-parter. What is your next project, and who are your biggest influences in thinking about your next project?
Ooh. Well, this one I could be involved in for the next number of years, because there are other pairings to the poems by Janessa that I think would be really beautiful to put together, and might be more appropriate for different places, depending on it. But I am also very, very interested in what I've talked about before, this whole idea of monuments and memorials, and I'm really, really interested in the possible idea of a third choice, which is not to remove and not to destroy, but is to recontextualize, and I don't just mean putting up a plaque or something like that or more information. I mean literally drastically changing the piece, but leaving parts of it there so that it's part of the story, but it's also part of the old story, and that I think there's some really interesting work that can be done there. Again, wouldn't be me by myself. This would be a collective of people being led by, you know, a range of people, range of different types of ethnic groups, and possibly historians to sort of show that we're acknowledging the past. We're not going to forget the past, but like the future is ours and the present is ours. So that's where I'm get really, really excited. And that's the total unknown for me too. But more neon, and I have some ideas for more neon pieces too. Was there something else?
That seems to be it. Nothing else has come in.
All right.
So thank you so much. We are really excited to have these here at the Matheson. For those of you out in cyberspace, I hope that you can come by and see them in person soon. Feel free to park at the museum and walk to see them at both buildings. And we look forward to seeing you all at our next program. Keep an eye on our emails and Facebook for details on what our next program is going to be. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.